All right, hello. My name is Balaj and welcome to today's video. If you're new here, I make videos about escaping doom scrolling, improving yourself, being more present in everyday life, as well as ultimately rebuilding your ability to focus and actually start paying attention again. And today's topic is going to be why you need to be more bored. Now, ask yourself this. When was the last time you had absolutely nothing stimulating you? Whether you're on public transport, in the bathroom, eating, or even while walking somewhere. We usually have our phones, music, or some form of entertainment filling the silence during those activities. We struggle to even sit through 30 seconds without a form of stimulation. Now, why is that? The reason why is because stimulating ourselves is a lot easier than sitting with boredom itself. But what if I told you boredom is actually good for us? What if constantly escaping it is actually making us worse at dealing with stillness, focus, and our own thoughts? There's a couple of topics that we're going to be talking about on this, so let's get started. So, firstly, what is boredom? So boredom isn't just doing nothing. You can have plenty to do and still be bored. Boredom is essentially the uncomfortable state of wanting to be engaged or stimulated while the current activity is not able to hold your attention or not able to feel that need to be engaged. There's two important factors that determine whether the activity is boring for you, and that is attention and meaning. So ask yourself, does it hold your attention enough to keep you engaged? And does it feel meaningful enough to continue engaging with? This is partly why we have different hobbies and interests as humans, as one task can be super engaging for some, while for others it could be completely boring. Now, when you are bored, your brain is basically telling you that what we're doing right now isn't engaging or meaningful enough for us, and we need to find something else to do. Boredom is essentially a signal. We often treat boredom as, something has gone wrong, you know, and we need to fix it. But boredom is actually just a signal that our body sends. And just like other comfortable states, it is trying to tell us something. For example, when you're hungry, the I think it's called ghrelin. Ghrelin gets released to signal to your body that you need to eat food. Same thing with loneliness. It pushes us towards connection and socializing, as well as fear, which warns us about possible danger. Boredom works in a very similar way to those emotions and those reactions. It tells us that we are currently doing something that is not engaging and it is not meaningful enough for us, and it encourages us to do something else. That could be, something more interesting, more rewarding, or more meaningful to our lives. And the issue isn't necessarily that we feel bored. The issue is that we immediately choose to numb that sensation, that uncomfortable feeling of boredom, as soon as it appears. And we do that with our phones or any other forms of instant gratification. Because instead of asking ourselves what else we could do, what else could I do, we often just reach for the easiest source of stimulation available, which is for most of us, it's in our pockets or right in front of us. And that is a big problem. We have an instant escape from boredom. Whereas in the past, boredom wasn't always something you could instantly get rid of. If you were waiting somewhere, if you were walking from place to place, or you're just sitting around with nothing to do, sometimes you just had to sit with it and deal with it. But now that we carry an unlimited stimulation like source in our pockets, the moment boredom appears, the response is almost automatic. As you can see from this diagram that I drew here, we reach for our phones, we unlock it, and we scroll. That boredom sensation is instantly cured. And instead of letting our minds wander or finding something else meaningful to do, we can escape this feeling almost instantly. This is one reason why it's become so difficult to be creative for everybody nowadays. That's why we are constantly relying on AI to do our creative thinking for us, and that is why a lot of AI based things are booming nowadays. But I'm not going to get into that topic now. And we don't explore other possibilities, or we don't sit with our thoughts long enough. We simply just numb the sensation of boredom with that mindless stimulation. But luckily, there is a way that we can reverse this effect, and it's quite simple. Literally, just stare at a wall. If you've been following my page for a bit, this is something that I've been talking about quite frequently, and I really think this is quite useful for the modern age person. I call it stimulus deprivation. Essentially, what it is you deliberately spend more time with lower levels of stimulation in order to down regulate how much stimulation we can expect at all times. And by giving your brain periods without constant scrolling, music, videos, or notifications, or any sort of stimulus, this will make normal activities feel more engaging again because you down regulated the amount of stimulation that you're exposing yourself to, making it easier for other activities that were boring before to be more engaging again. So, this is a really important tool that you can start implementing. Literally just stare at a wall for 10 to 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long period, and within that time of practically no stimulation, the task that you previously had trouble focusing on will become much easier to progress in. Now, next, I wanted to talk about the boredom and the phone cycle that we all tend to go through. And the way that that goes is the more often we escape boredom with our phones, the more automatic that response becomes. You feel bored, you check your phone, you get instant stimulation, and that uncomfortable feeling of boredom disappears for a moment. Now, over time, your brain starts to pick up this very simple pattern. You get bored, you pick up your phone, you get relief. And it kind of depends on this over time due to neuroplasticity. So the next time boredom appears, basically, we reach for our phones almost automatically. We don't even think about it anymore. We don't even realize. And this can create that loop where boredom actually leads to scrolling, and that scrolling fragments your attention, and the normal activities feel even more difficult. So yeah, here's another little graph that we can look at. Is it called a graph? I'm not sure. That's what I'm going to call it. Basically, you go from boredom, then you solve that boredom by scrolling, and that scrolling has an effect on your attention, which then becomes fragmented because you've overstimulated yourself, which then leads to more boredom because you elevated the amount of stimulation that you need in order for yourself to be engaged. So yeah, ironically, by constantly trying to eliminate boredom, it actually makes us worse at tolerating it, and it makes us more bored. It's, as you can see, it's very similar to a substance addiction. Next, the constant stimulation makes life feel boring. If you couldn't tell from the previous point, we're going to go into it a little bit more here. Constant stimulation can actually slowly change what we expect from everyday life. So, comparing scrolling, for example, to reading, scrolling gives you something new every few seconds, or literally every second, depending on how fast you scroll. We get a new person, new sound, new idea, new visual stimulus. Whereas reading might require you to stay on the same page for a few minutes, depending on how fast you read, with nothing actually new happening. The same thing happens with studying. TikTok constantly changes and you get to choose what you look at. Studying is usually the same desk, the same topic, over and over again, requiring your sustained attention. And when you look at the grand scheme of things, your normal life cannot compete with the endlessly changing and stimulating feed. It's just not feasible. And because of this, slower activities start to feel very underwhelming and understimulating, such as reading, studying, conversations, walking, even work at times can feel super boring in comparison. And it's not necessarily that these activities became boring all of a sudden. It's just our expectations of stimulus has changed. And here's the good thing about boredom. It actually gives your mind room to wander because we always fill our minds with stimulus. It doesn't allow space for us to think. So when we aren't constantly focusing on something externally, our mind naturally starts to wander. And you might, for example, you might start thinking about your past, something you need to do tomorrow, a conversation you had and you're reliving it, or an idea that you've been sitting on, or a problem that you haven't figured out yet. And instead of constantly receiving stimulus from somewhere else, your brain starts to generate its own. This is where that creative thinking kicks in. And I'm sure you've noticed as well, but this is where some of your best ideas come to you. They randomly appear while you're doing an idle task. Let's say you're taking a shower, you're washing the dishes, you're doing something boring. You get these random ideas pop into your mind that you want to do. That's because, as previously mentioned, we've down regulated our stimulation that is required to entertain us. Your brain basically starts to think of things that are more engaging than what you're doing now. And you're not necessarily trying to think of anything on purpose. Your mind just finally has the space to do so and connect different thoughts together. And by allowing periods where your mind isn't constantly occupied, it gives you more opportunity to wonder, reflect, and come up with new ideas. This is why I encourage people to stare at a wall for 15 minutes and just do absolutely nothing, as this is where all your amazing ideas will come to fruition and come to the surface. Continuing on, boredom forces you to sit with your own thoughts. So the constant stimulation gives us a really easy way to avoid uncomfortable thoughts. When you remove that stimulation, suddenly there isn't anything distracting you from what you were feeling or what you were thinking. And that discomfort is useful because it gives you a chance to notice the things that you've been ignoring, and it allows you to actually digest those thoughts and feelings. If every quiet moment that we had is filled with stimulation immediately, we don't really give ourselves enough space to ask ourselves what we need to change, what we've been avoiding, or what we're worried about. Essentially, boredom creates room for self reflection, which is extremely important. And boredom is the most important for focus. Almost everything that requires our sustained attention will eventually become boring. Reading isn't exciting every second, and neither is studying, work, exercise, or even learning a skill. There will always be moments where motivation wears off and you're left doing something repetitive. That is how you actually master a skill, or that is how you become good at studying. That is how you actually learn and pick up things, by constantly repeating the same thing over and over. That is why some of us are really good at doom scrolling. And with this, you start to train yourself to quit the moment that you're doing as soon as it is not stimulating for you. And part of being able to focus is learning to stay with the task even after it becomes boring. And that's how you can train your mind to actually focus. So sit with that uncomfortable feeling of boredom and keep bringing your attention back to the task in front of you instead of immediately escaping it. And this is going to be very, very challenging for a lot of us here. This is why boredom and effort are so closely connected as well. They're kind of interlinked, they bounce off each other. Anything meaningful usually requires repetition, and repetition almost always becomes boring, and we need to accept that. You don't need to enjoy it, but we need to stop treating boredom like it is something wrong, because it isn't. But I don't want to make boredom sound like something that can automatically improve your life. It's not. There's actually two different comparisons that I can kind of make, and that is temporary boredom and chronic disengagement. Temporary boredom is when you're unstimulated for a period of time and you allow yourself to just sit with that uncomfortable feeling. Chronic disengagement is when nothing feels engaging to you anymore, nothing interests you, and you believe that there's nothing worth doing for long periods of time, which can be an actual side effect of long term scrolling as well, because you are so accustomed to that instant stimulation that without it, there is there's nothing worth doing, because there is nothing that will give you more stimulation and more engagement than that. The whole goal of this boredom scenario that I'm giving to you guys it's very simple. It's to become more comfortable with small periods of low stimulation without immediately needing to remedy it and escape it. We're trying to become better at tolerating it. Now here's the ha- now here's how excuse me. Now here's how we can get better at being bored. The easiest way is by stopping yourself from filling every small gap with a form of stimulation. So what I want you to do is stop multitasking, do one thing at a time, and intentionally spend time doing lower stimulation activities, such as reading, such as walking without your phone, and getting from place to place without your phone. Very simple. Or even just moving your phone out of reach when you're working on something. And if you're trying to focus on something, physically, yeah, as I mentioned, physically move your phone away. Don't constantly force yourself to choose between the task that you are currently doing and an infinite source of entertainment sitting right next to you. That choice becomes very, very irresistible. So you need to put your phone away from your desk or wherever you are working. Now, I'm going to give you a heads up. At first, being unstimulated will probably feel extremely uncomfortable, and that is the point. You do not need constant stimulation. You will be okay. And you can progressively overload this just like in the gym. So, for example, let's say you are going to work on something and you look at your phone every 5 seconds. Try to resist that urge for 10 seconds, and then 15, 20, 30 seconds, 1 minute, so on and so forth. Whatever measurement, whatever metric that you need to use, just go a bit longer without stimulation. And lastly, I just want to point out boredom isn't the enemy. We've kind of made it something that needs to be eliminated and constantly avoided. But boredom actually serves a purpose, as I mentioned before. It tells us that something isn't engaging or meaningful enough for you to continue doing it. And by being able to tolerate it, it allows us to stay focused when something stops being exciting. We are no longer dependent on focusing on something. We're no longer dependent on an instant return. Because let's face it, your life isn't supposed to entertain you every second. There will be quiet moments. Excuse me. There will be repetitive moments. There will be moments where absolutely nothing interesting is happening. And this is how we actually improve, by doing these things and engaging in these activities. So the problem isn't boredom. The problem is believing that every moment of boredom needs to be escaped. that is the end. That brings us to the end of our video. I hope that was useful for you. We're going to go through a quick summary. So, essentially, we want to stop filling every moment up with stimulation. Let yourself sit in silence, stare at a wall, wait without checking your phone, and give your brain periods of low stimulation. As I mentioned, it doesn't have to be very long. It can be 10 to 15 minutes, and then you can progressively improve that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be for hours on end. Next thing, we want to make sure that our phones are harder to access. So by putting it physically away when we're trying to focus, so reading, studying, working, or anything that requires sustained attention, we want to physically remove the source of stimulation for that period. The next thing that I previously talked about in another video, do one thing at a time. Stop multitasking. There is no way that you can focus on multiple things at once. So just focus on one task at a time and divide your and focus your attention on that single thing that you are doing. The next thing, you want to stay with boring tasks a little longer. When boredom appears, stick with it and try to progressively stick with it longer and longer. Bring your attention back instead of trying to escape it. This will build up your focus. Next is use boredom as a space to think. So let your mind wander, reflect, and explore ideas instead of constantly numbing that feeling. You don't need to numb it. It actually is trying to help you. That's your brain activating and wanting to work on something that it finds more meaningful. And to close it off, the goal isn't to become bored at all times, it's to stop needing stimulation every time boredom appears. All right, that is it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed that little segment. And if you found the video useful, please consider subscribing so you don't miss the next video. Additionally to that, be sure to join the Discord community as well. It's a place where you can ask me questions directly, get updates on the channel, suggest future topics, as well as connect with other people that are like-minded like yourself and are trying to improve their focus, be more present, and spend less time mindlessly scrolling. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.